In this section, we're going to be discussing cube functions. You're probably wondering, why are we discussing them? Well, you're right. They're not part of DAX. Therefore, you don't hear them together alongside with DAX. But they are very useful. And you'll think of why. Well, so far, we've retrieved data with pivot tables. And that's great. It makes it very easy. But sometimes you just want to be able to go and get the data by yourself. Specific attributes, measures, etc., etc. It's easier if you want to do it as you're used to in Excel. And that's where these functions come in to help you. They really make it much more easier to do so. They facilitate the retrieval of that data. They also allow for creating your custom reports, which you, after all, are doing in Excel one way or another using rows, cells. You just mix and match them. This is where it's going to be very interesting because you can pull it from those data sources that you have readily available. Well, cube functions. Which ones, you're probably wondering? Well, there's around 4 of those. Cube value, cube member, cube set, and cube rank member. We'll look at cube value, cube member, and cube rank member mostly. We'll leave for you cube set as a homework. That said, let's go ahead and take a look at the demo. Let's start by opening Excel, our blank workbook, into Power Pivot, the Manage button, and expand the entire window. Retrieve from Axis the Contoso sales, test it, and click Next. We're going to use the fact sales and all of its related tables. This might take a bit because we have around 2.5 million records in fact sales. Notice that it's barely getting up to 1 million. Once it gets 2 million, it gets really close to completing the entire process, which is almost there. We have a few more to go, and it should complete in a few seconds, as we can see right now. Your mileage may vary as well, depending on your hardware specs. I click on Close. We see that everything is available there for us. Our fact sales, everything that we were looking to retrieve and import into our data model. We're going to start by adding our pivot table, our external data connection source, opening it, putting it in a new worksheet, which we will name accordingly, Time Intelligence. We're going to collapse all of the existing data in the bar, and we're going to choose the sales quantity. That is correct. It's been displayed, and from the date, we're going to look for the calendar year, but we're going to add it as a row. We're going to drag and drop it into. And there we go. We're going to remove it from the, and we have the data that we're looking for. We're going to format it a bit, and we're going to move into taking a good look at what we just did. We have a pivot table, nothing more, nothing less. But we've never really explored what it is to see cube functions. We haven't used them at all. In order to convert this pivot table to cube functions, we have to click on the Analyze, OLAP Tools, Convert to Formulas. As soon as the screen blinked, you notice that now we have formulas instead of a pivot table. And that's great. This gives us a good starting point so that we can understand how we can get data from our source. Now that we've done that, let's go into see if we can find some calculated fields that we can add. Let's click on Fact Sales and just look here into the formulas to see if we see any cube category, which we didn't. Let's go down into C. Notice that there is nothing. And you probably wonder why. As mentioned before, they are not part of DAX. That is why they are not there. That said, let's go back to our workbook and try to locate one based on the cube member. So we're going to start building already a formula. We're going to use, as you notice, once I opened the quotes, it took our connection, and I'm going to tell it I want to use my date, the calendar year. And I'm going to close and see what happens. It tells me, okay, I recognize it. I have all of those attributes in memory ready for you. But that's about it. Well, that's not good. Now that we're a little bit disappointed, we're going to go and type in all the years that we were looking to retrieve. Now that we finished adding them, I'm going to see if I can convert or pull data based on those values. So I'm going to use cube member once more and dim date with the calendar year. But now I'm going to do a little bit of a trick here. Notice I'm attempting to concatenate and see if we're successful. And we are. What this does is it converts our value on the left to an attribute. And it is available. Great. Now, how can we get the sum? We have the year. Let's try another cube value, another formula. With this one, and we're going to tell it to reference B3 with B10. Why? B10 contains the year that we're looking to pull from data from. Well, nothing popped up. Probably because we don't have any 2005 data. Let's copy this down and see if we have any effect. There we go. Now we have something. Let's format it to see if it's easier to compare. And notice that for 2007, we were able to get data, 2008 and 2009. The others, we were not able to because there is no data. So we're right on a roll here because we are able to retrieve our data just by doing that. We started here and kept on going down, copying like that. We're really doing well now. We have all this information. Now, if we would be able to filter it, that'd be also great, just like in a pivot table. An example would be, let's add a pivot table in here, choosing our source in our existing, and we're going to do the same thing we did before. Just going to collapse them. I'm going to use a sales quantity. Great. Now we're going to group by the year. And it should be row. Okay, we're good here. The values are there. Add a little formatting. But these are, how about using a slicer in here? Let's add a slicer. Add the year as a slicer and move it to the right below. So if we choose 2007, it filters. Let's replicate or attempt to replicate the same functionality in our information. So let's leave this pivot table, custom pivot table that we created here, and let's do this. Let's type calendar year, and sliced. Going to type in here another function, cube rack member, with the connection. I'm going to start with dim date, calendar year, dot all, tab, but now notice I'm going to type something in here that had no intelligence. And I'm going to tell it to reference A1, row A1. Wow, what happened there? What happened is what we were expecting to do with the behavior the previous time we created this table. Retrieve the existing years into our custom workbook here. So now I just copied it, notice, and it picked up the information. Just went and did it. The row is a trick just to tell it retrieve the information as internally in memory and put it in this row and give it to me now. And that's what it did. So that means we're doing good so far. What we want to do now is going to get some more values. Let's use QValue, once more the connection, and now we're going to attempt the following. We're going to tell it, get the data from this year here. Well, as expected, nothing. But let's make sure that there is more data, and as expected, there is. So it pulled the information. Now, how can we attempt the same thing, but with data that is sliced? Well, let's try that. Let's copy that same formula. Let's retype it in there. We choose our workbook model, and we're once more going to use the same reference. But now, if I type SL, notice I see slicer calendar here. That might be our slicer calendar. Let's close it and see what happens. Oh, okay, let's copy it. And it's the same. Let's remove the slicer. And notice that it matches the entire sum. We've incorporated the slicer now into the functionality. I'm not saying this is how you should do it. This is just to get our feet wet in here and understand how things work, all giving us an idea of all the possibilities that we can really reach with just playing with a few of these formulas. It's very, very intriguing, to say the least. So we have, just for the sake of our current demo, we almost have everything we need. Assuming that this is a great report and they love it just the way it is, which it needs some rework according to me, but we would like to add a date timestamp. And probably that's not the correct term, but we want to be able to tell the end user the sales data that we are processing. This is the last date, sales date, that is processed within those sales itself, so that they know, well, if that changes, they have more data they can compare. But at this moment, they need to know where they stand so that they can make some good decisions. For that, we're going to need to go into Power Pivot, into the window, and let's go into any of these. Let's create a calculated formula called last date of sales, and we're going to use the last date function against the fact sales date key. Let's see if we get some data. It's telling us that this is the last date that it found in there, which makes some sense based on the data we see just quickly at a glance. I'm sure there is a 1213, 1231 in there somewhere. We just haven't seen it, so we're going to head back into the pivot table, and now we're going to try to use QValue to retrieve this recently created. I'm going to do QValue, and of course we need a connection. Going to do a cube member now, combination. Notice that we could do both things here. Also needs a connection. And I'm going to open, and we see under measures, because that's where it's going to be storing that calculated field. Notice we have it there available. Great. Now let's close this, and it seems to be working fine. Well, that's a number. That's not exactly what I was looking for, but maybe I'm just being too harsh. Let's right-click on it, format the cell, and look for date. Let's choose this type just for the sake, and there we go. We have retrieved what we were looking for, the last date of a fact sale in that table. You're encouraged to continue exploring this in your exercise files, or create new from your existing data, so you can create more data itself and reports that are customized that meet your needs entirely.